Welcome to the sixth annual Food Justice Film Festival presented by the Center for Biological Diversity. I'm Linda Rico, Food Justice Film Festival Coordinator with the Center. I'm so happy to be joined today by Mark Decena, writer and director of the film Farming While Black, which is featured in this year's festival. Welcome, Mark, and thank you so much for speaking with me today.
So happy to be here. I love the Center for Biological Diversity.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. We're so happy to have you and very happy to be featuring this film.
Excited to be here.
So, Farming While Black was such a powerful and inspiring film to watch. I just knew that I had to include it in this year's lineup. Cannot wait for our viewers to see it. But I was wondering if you could share why you were inspired by Leah Penniman's story, and her book, Farming While Black, as well as her compatriots, Blain Snipstal and Karen Washington, who are also featured in the film.
Great. Well, I will back up just a little bit because a previous film that we did was called Not Without Us. We
Mhm.
followed seven grassroots activists to the climate talks in Paris. And it's coming up on its 10-year anniversary. And we're actually going to do a little re-release of the film because as you know, the Paris Climate Accords were the solution to the climate crisis, and 192 nations signed on. And as we know, the U.S. has pulled out twice and is currently out of the agreement. Temperatures are rising, weather's becoming more and more unstable,
Mhm.
floods, fires, everything is sort of coming to fruition of what the activists said was going to happen. And of course, we're moving backwards
Right.
politically. But after that film, I was hungering for a film about solutions because I know how important it is to push back against the bad and speak truth to
Right.
power. But I was just wanting to do a film like what is the solution to the climate crisis, or what is one of the solutions? And I'd read a book called Drawdown, which looks at the 100 top solutions to the climate crisis. And interestingly, that one of the largest solutions in aggregate is changing how we use land and changing how we grow food. And I was in 2019 and I heard a podcast by Leah Penniman. She was on her book tour, Farming While Black. And
Mhm.
I was just taken by not only the solutions that regenerative agriculture can be one of the solutions to the climate crisis, but also just it sort of created this Venn diagram of crossing between social justice, environmental justice, climate justice, and she's just such an amazing human being. And just hearing her speak, she mentioned I'm going to be on my book tour through San Francisco, Ramaytush territory. And I called her up or contacted her, I think email,
Mhm.
and she agreed to meet with us. She was doing several talks in the Bay Area, and she agreed to do an interview. We had no idea what we were going to do at the time. I think we
Mhm.
might even said we were going to do a short film. And 4 years later, we finished the feature. And she did say, "This is the last feature film anyone's going to do about us." Because we were very respectful, but it's a big undertaking to be, to have a film crew call you up every 6 months and say, "How's it going? Maybe we'll be out
Right.
there. Can we film you?" But yeah, and I of course got the book and was just also smitten by what an important tool it is for this rising generation of Black
Mhm.
and brown farmers who are coming about, and who she is inspiring, along with her compatriots, the
Mhm.
Soulfire, and other characters in the film. It's a
Right.
growing movement, which I'm very, very happy to be supporting.
That's incredible. So, did you also hear about Karen's story and Blaine's story when you got in touch with Leah, or did you hear about them before as well, and you all kind of put it together?
Yeah, so Karen, we definitely met through Leah.
Mhm.
We were asking for other folks to talk to, and the minute I talked to Karen, it's like, okay, you've got to be in the film. Um, but coincidentally, I had met Blain at a systemic change conference a
Oh,
few years before, and actually had interviewed him.
wow. Hmm.
And Blain is such an incredible mind, and he's worked a lot in the agroecology movements and has traveled all around the world, and has a quite a sharp critique of the systemic issues that are facing us, which are mainly driven by a very, very rapacious system of capitalism that's really just kind of put profit above everything else.
Right.
And and I had no idea that he knew Leah. And when I was interviewing Leah, she had mentioned that Blaine was they had written an article together
Hmm.
on black farmers, and she said that he was a big inspiration for writing the book because of his terminology that his group came up with, which was
Yeah.
Afroecology, a sort of take on
Hmm.
agroecology, but Afroecology being very specific to the U.S. situation of
Hmm.
of black farmers in the U.S. and the historical situations that have happened.
Right. Well, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. When I was reading about you, I read that you were raised by an immigrant single mother. And you're not the first director that we've had in the festival who was raised by an immigrant single mother. And so I'm always interested to know what experiences you had growing up that ultimately led you down this path, of sharing the stories of others through film or just even having this interest in these justice movements.
Mhm. Yes, my mom, rest her soul, may she rest in power, was an incredible woman. She raised three boys by herself in the Bay Area. Came here, separated from my dad, came here, found a house, got a job, and then we, raised us by herself. Um, and I would say that, she was always involved in the arts. She always was always doing, making dolls or
Mhm.
painting or doing copper work. So I think that instilled this love of the arts. I don't think I ever told her I want to be a filmmaker. She probably would like, what? What are you talking about? You need to get a real job. Um, but I think that instilled my love of the arts. I always have been drawing or painting or
Right.
doing crafts myself. But I think the biggest thing that she instilled, which has been an influence, was that, part of the way she raised us and controlled us was that she made us work in the garden.
Oh,
And the
wow.
US, I mean the California soil, I don't know if you know,
Hmm.
but it's adobe hard clay. So
Hmm.
you have to work the soil, you have to add,
Right.
compost and break it up and so, we did not like doing that work. Um, but then, the garden that she grew, she always had food for us from the
Wow.
garden that I've learned to appreciate
Hmm.
much, much later in life. So much so that I wish that I had forced my kids to work in the garden because in the present moment, you're like, "Oh, this is very hard work. I'm not sure I like this."
Right.
But later on, you realize like, oh, this is, you miss touching the soil.
Right.
I'm trying to grow a garden out here in the backyard, which
Oh,
have
nice.
limited success because it's very cold here in the summers, and I need to trim a few trees to get more sun. But yeah, she's an amazing influence on my life.
I think it's really interesting that you were able to grow up and learning how to have a relationship with the land and growing your own food. Was part of that, was that because there was food insecurity in your household and your mom wanted to get that access, and to you all like, very simply, or was it just part of the culture? I'm interested to hear more about that.
Yeah. I think if there was food insecurity in our house, my mom never let us know.
Mhm.
She just made it as normal as possible.
Yeah.
Um, there are times when I would say, "Can we have, can I bring over, my friend over for dinner?" And
Mhm.
I do remember this now. She said, "There's not enough, so you
Yeah.
can't." Like I was so bummed that she would say no, but now I think back and like, yeah, she was trying to raise a family by herself and put food on the table. And
Right.
um, but I think the gardening just came. She has an incredible green thumb. She can make anything grow, and it made me appreciate. I think like Karen, I made me appreciate tomatoes because hated tomatoes. I mean, she would have us pour sugar on the tomatoes to make it taste better, and that just made it worse.
Yeah.
And then we would, pick tomatoes from the garden, and it's like, these are actually really sweet by themselves. They don't need the
Right. They taste
sugar.
different.
Yeah, and the green beans and squash and all of that was so wonderful to have fresh. I'm trying to emulate that now, and
Yeah.
mom is looking down at me saying, uh, in Japanese they say "urusai ne," which is you're so annoying. Why can't you grow food? No, I'm sure she's very proud of me, but I'm trying to live up to her.
Well, you'll have to share some progress photos once you have some things
Yes,
growing in the garden.
I
Our
will.
viewers
I
would
will.
love to see that.
Okay, I will for sure.
So, in the film, Leah Penniman, as we spoke about her, co-founder of Soulfire Farm, highlights in her book and in the film the oppressive history of Black farmers in the U.S., with Black-owned farms going from a height of 14% in 1910 to less than 2% today. Can you share more about this decline in Black-owned farms, how it happened and how it affected the Black community in terms of access to food, through your conversations with Leah?
Right. Yeah, it's pretty tragic, and as we all know, this country was born from stolen land and
Right.
stolen labor.
Hmm.
1619 is when the first slave ships filled with slave labor were brought over and built this country. I mean, they were the original farmers and many of
Right.
them were chosen because they know how to grow food. The rice farmers in Carolinas, they didn't know how to grow rice, and so they brought brought over uh, enslaved Africans to help them do it. Um, and supposedly after the end of the Civil War, and the slaves were freed, that they were even promised land, 40 acres and a mule, and
Mhm.
that field order was ignored once a new president came in. And we've heard about the time of Reconstruction, which is there was 8 years after the Civil War, and actually Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote a book called "We Were 8 Years in Power," and it sort of parallels those 8 years of Reconstruction and the 8 years that Obama was in the presidency,
Mhm.
and um, really looks at during that time of enlightenment, that as soon as the Reconstruction ended, there was such a backlash. That's when the Jim Crow laws came into effect, and
Right.
all of the gains that a lot of the black farmers made were then either stolen forcibly, or they were
Mhm.
chased off the land. There was lynchings and murders, and then to exasperate things, the USDA was also discriminatory in the
Right.
purview of loans, and that's talked about in the film as well. The Federation of Southern Cooperatives highlights that the Pickford lawsuit was actually admission by the USDA that there had been discrimination. And people think like in loans, what does loans have to do with farming? But farming is very much a speculative type of thing. You need to have
Mhm.
perfect timing of when the seeds go in. You have to buy the seeds. You have to get all the equipment together. And if you don't have this, if you don't can't get a loan to buy the seeds or the other equipment, you can't get your crops in the ground, and therefore you have no income. And then
Mhm.
so they default in their loans, and that's how a lot of the land was taken by the U.S. government and
Mhm.
given to white farmers. And it's still happening today. I mean,
Right.
there's such a um, sad moment right now of just how much erasure of U.S. history is happening.
Mhm.
You know, and I say often, critical race theory is not a theory. It's our history that we have not come to terms with.
Exactly.
And the reason it keeps coming back is there's
Mhm.
this underlying poison of white supremacy that's still around. And it's not just the U.S. I mean, there's an incredible book called Caste, written by Isabel Wilkerson,
Mhm.
and looks at the origins of just the othering that does happen. Unfortunately, many times it's folks that have black or brown skin, and
Mhm.
that's they're I mean, initially or not initially, but are seen as inferior and less than human, and
Right.
that's been throughout history. But the U.S. is one of the only countries that hasn't really dealt with it, and
Mhm.
we want to you know push back to when times were good, but times were not good for
Yeah.
many folks in this country.
Yeah.
The surprising thing about the film, I mean, I think we initially made the film. My producer in life and film, Liz,
Mhm.
and we made the film thinking that the target audience was going to be this rising generation of black and brown farmers, of which it has been really um, satisfying to reach that audience. But we're also have been surprised by how broad it's reached, and the allyship that people have really stepped up. And
Mhm.
you know and many times I'm surprised people, white folks, who see the film like, wow, I had no idea. Like, how could you have no
I
idea?
know. Yeah.
I mean, but I'm glad you're seeing it now, and
Right.
there's an engagement that happens, like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. And a big
Mhm.
part of our impact campaign is to have panel discussions with local black and brown farmers. Like, I don't, sometimes I go to the Q&A, but we make sure that there's a connection with the audience to local farmers, black and brown farmers in their communities, so they can, because a lot of times they see the films like, what can I do? And
Right.
I will always say, what can they do? And the local folks will say, we're doing this, we're doing this, we need support here.
Right. This year is really special because this year we're talking a lot about agricultural heritage, ancestral foods, this relationship to the land, especially like BIPOC-led solutions to gaining back land. And all of the films this year have this sort of common thread highlighting this. And I think those are words and phrases that people are not familiar with. So I
Mhm.
think this year in particular is going to be a really nice sort of teaching and learning year for a lot of people. And I'm, in this film in particular, I mean, it's just fabulous the way that you were able to capture. There's a lot of information, with all of this, but it's very easy to absorb with this film,
Mhm. Right.
and I think everyone who was part of the film and just seeing the way everything worked together is really nice. I think our viewers are going to enjoy not only watching it, but learning a lot and
Mhm.
hearing a lot of important stats that they may not have known before.
Right. Yeah, and I credit it all to the characters. I mean, we, as a filmmaker,
Mhm.
try to make character-driven films where you have an affinity or even fall in love with a character,
Right.
and then you're more open to what they have to say, and maybe it's some uncomfortable truths that they may bring up. But
Right.
yeah, it's the it's the sugar with the medicine.
Yeah.
And we have three really good, messengers in the film that talk about different aspects um, of the not only the difficulties they face, but I'm also, no spoiler alert, but I'm so happy that the film has, some positive resolutions,
Yeah.
and we've gotten that response too, that the film is
Hmm.
very uplifting. And you
Yes.
don't know that as a documentary filmmaker, like, oh, yeah, that worked out, or this worked out, or you've done this. I'm not going to tell
Right.
everything because I want people to see that in the film, but um, it's a, as Leah said, it's challenging title when she started to write the book. It's like, I want
Hmm.
to make sure that this is, relevant to the folks that are going to read it.
Yeah,
Uh, and I'm happy that we were able to tell the story with some positive resolutions, even though
absolutely.
there's lots of work to do still.
Hmm. Oh
Um,
yeah, absolutely. Well, one of those messengers in the film, Blain Snipstal, owner and worker at Earthbound Building, he talks about how gaining back a relationship with the land is very difficult when the land has become deeply commoditized due to the capitalist society that we live in. And it's also not to mention the systemic racism in the US, especially as we were talking about before, in our agricultural system, with the USDA. And that has resulted in a lot of land ownership for Black people to be very difficult as well.
mm,
Can you comment further on that, just that aspect of the conversation that you had with Blaine?
yeah, I mean, he does such an amazing analysis and takedown of capitalism and its, what it's brought us to, and what it's continuing to bring us to. I mean, I don't necessarily want to talk about AI, but that's just, here in San Francisco, we're just seeing this capitalistic fervor over this latest technology that we have no idea what's
Hmm.
going to happen with this. And but that's the traits of capitalism. It's just
Hmm.
all driven by profit, and then, apologize later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the capitalist system, Blaine mentions that, the plantation economy was sort of the basis for
Hmm.
modern capitalism. It's just, one person at the top controls all the labor,
Hmm.
sets, in the case of plantations, free labor by
Yeah.
owning people. But it's just it's just grown to the point where it's affecting every aspect of our lives. And I'm talking about climate. I'm very much, a climate activist, and, root cause of climate crisis and, greatest inequality in history of mankind is from this unbridled capitalistic fervor that's now
Hmm.
on steroids.
Yeah.
And, just, going back to the loss of land and systemic racism,
Hmm.
it's one thing that's not necessarily talked about in the film, but it's just, I think Leah does talk about it a little bit, but
Hmm.
just the amount of generational wealth that is lost, has
Yeah.
been lost. And, they're saying it's in the billions of dollars if
Right.
people, Black farmers, still owned as much land as they did. And,
Hmm.
um, and as we all know, if you trying to ever buy a house, the cost of land is just astronomical. And to think
Hmm.
to think that you could buy 50 acres of land to start a farm,
Right.
the numbers just don't add up, which is why,
Hmm.
we have the USDA, and there's loans, and there's, lots of subsidizing of
Hmm.
farmers. And, it's the Black farmers who have been cheated out of a big aspect of that. I mean,
Right.
the film talks about, some of the funds that were set aside for Black farmers during, there
Hmm.
was a Justice for Black Farmers Act, and then there was the Inflation Reduction Act, which promised, billions of dollars, and that was immediately fought against, in the courts. And there was a settlement. I think some money did go to Black farmers, but they had to change the legislation to make it race neutral,
Hmm.
which is, it was, the discrimination was not race neutral.
Right.
Um,
It was just unfortunate the way all of that happened, and it seemed like the point got completely missed.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just, people wanted to stay in power and keep their power,
Right.
and that's why, I think there needs to be a systemic change, from our economic system. But I also feel like there needs to be, evolution of our consciousness and our
Yeah.
humanity to not
Mhm.
want to have, me first. And that, and in reading Leah's books, and then I'm, just finished reading Robin Wall Kimmerer's books. Just raced through them. I love her books, but just that connection
Mhm.
to nature again, and how,
Yeah.
we need to act with nature and get back to some of those indigenous knowledges that respected nature. And
Mhm.
I've learned as well that, people think that, oh, indigenous cultures, they didn't they just let the land be. They're actually were the very first folks who used the land. They would, do prescribed burns to keep the forests and acorns going. They had a relationship with the land that
Right.
wasn't just take it all.
Hmm.
And and her books have taught me that, that very first harvest, you don't take the first one, you go to the next one. You make sure that there's, enough for everybody, and then
Right.
if you do harvest, you only take what you need.
I see a big movement happening too with, indigenous food sovereignty
Mm,
and
mm,
just the food sovereignty movement. But one of our films this year also talks about indigenous food sovereignty and how important that is. How you were saying there has been this relationship with the land of our First Nation peoples here forever,
yeah.
since the beginning. And one of the films follows a farmer who is bringing that back to his First
Mm,
Nation community and putting them first in terms of getting food access to these communities who don't have it right now. But really focusing on that relationship with the land, and I feel like we saw that too so much in Farming While Black, because we see everyone who's working at Soulfire Farm, practicing these ways of farming, planting ancestral foods, foods that are important to them and their culture and their history. And I just think that that is such an important part of, how you said, building back this connection. We have
mm.
to kind of learn where we come from, so to speak, and food is such a big part of that.
Yeah, yeah. And in the Bay Area, there's an organization called the Segurite Land Trust, that we actually did a short film a few years ago. And they're one of those organizations that are actively wanting land back. They are granted land back. They just got a big piece of land in the on the East Bay
Great.
Hills, and it's that reclaiming that sacred connection to the
Mhm.
land.
We also learned about food justice activist and guerrilla gardener and farm owner of Rise and Root Farm in New York, Karen Washington, who I also had the pleasure of speaking with last year. And she always says that a tomato changed her life, as you mentioned earlier as well, and that that's what inspired her to start growing her own food and, getting involved in creating community garden space for her
Mhm.
beloved community. What about Karen's work in the food justice movement really inspired you when you were making this film? And I know there's a lot to choose from.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think also just meeting Karen, the energy you've talked to her, even through
Mhm.
Zoom, you can feel her energy. I've done
Yeah.
some Q&As with her.
Hmm.
She's amazing. But I think what I was most inspired by her is that, she just wanted to garden. So, she started in her backyard, and then, a community garden across the street. But then when all of that was about to be taken away, when Mayor Giuliani at the time decided to just sell off all these
Oh, yeah.
incredible plots
Hmm.
of land, and she found herself to be becoming an activist. Uh,
Hmm.
and that I see parallels in that too, because I've had a career in filmmaking and started as a narrative filmmaker, and then when something ignites something, you start to feel the energy of wanting to either preserve something or to change something, and that light going off in Karen her telling that story, I just related to so much, and I think inspires a lot of people because it's, especially in these times where you're feeling a
Mhm.
little bit lost. Sometimes it's just diving in and doing something, working with your
Yeah.
hands, and then
Hmm.
that leads to hands lead the heart, and where
Right.
she found her voice as an activist and really fought to preserve all those gardens.
Yeah.
And I love it that now she's got a farm in upstate New York, a Rise and Root
Hmm.
Farm. And spoiler alert, sorry. But
I really liked how she also talked about this idea of, when she was talking about Black farmers, coming together when they have a little more acreage than they think they're going to use,
hmm,
and, having another farmer kind of use that or splitting it up so that people can come in and learn how to use that land and grow off that land. And I really like that idea because ultimately everybody who you spoke to in the film is talking about this like sense of community, like how do we help each other, right, get to
hmm.
this place and get land back. And I just really love that because even speaking with her last year, she was so excited about this young generation coming up and in the youth, learning how to grow and creating this very safe space, where people are welcome and able to learn and grow and then hopefully teach others. But I did really appreciate that. Have you heard anything else about, um, you know, having land like that is shared, or was there anything else said, outside the film about that?
Yeah, so I think she was referring to mostly white farmers who, and I've seen that come across where, yeah, we
Hmm.
got, all this land and we don't know what to do with. And
Hmm.
um, that said, too, the film has also revealed, black folks who have said, "Oh yeah, we have all this land that we're just leasing to the farmer next door."
Hmm.
But the idea of grow a lot of food on an acre of land, and if you can give that opportunity to
Yeah.
somebody young up and coming farmer, because that land is the biggest obstacle.
Right.
It's you can work in a community garden, but you don't
Hmm.
maybe don't own that land. It could go away.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it would be, and she even says the word, but it's kind of a, I don't know, sacrilegious word to say reparations, but that the idea of reparations and the idea of
Yeah.
giving land or sharing land,
Hmm.
again, talks to our capitalistic, um, you know, tendencies to, can't give anything away, but
Right.
that idea of creating community is
Hmm.
so important. And I I
Absolutely.
I like and Leah talks about this. It didn't make the film, and maybe will be an outtake, but to talk about Octavia Butler's book, um, Parable of the Sower, and the idea of earth seed. And I just saw a post recently where a lot of black farms, including Soulfire, but a lot of them are becoming more of these community spaces where,
Hmm.
you know, not only about survival and growing food, but just creating that connection that you have within community.
Hmm.
I mean, it's some of my favorite screenings have been in small community gardens. And
Yeah.
I always joke that I love to screen the film for tomatoes and cucumbers and sunflowers.
I bet they
But
love it. They
I,
say that plants, they feel the energy and they
yeah,
grow.
yeah.
They're
No, it's
very
been
receptive to it.
been great, and
Well,
we hope to have more in
well, I
garden.
want to know, like Karen, if you were to pick a fruit or vegetable that changed your life, what would it be and why?
Hmm. Well, I kind of mentioned the tomato, but I have to say I'm such a huge fan of stone fruit in the
Oh,
summer
wow.
that
That's a great one.
I think it might go back to, we had my mom's friends in San Jose. She had a big cherry tree in the backyard, and we would, go there with my brothers, and we would pick
Hmm.
cherries and just,
Hmm.
stone fruit. You have to eat it. It's got to dribble down your chin and get all
Hmm.
of your clothes.
Yep.
But I have such a crush on stone fruit
Hmm.
when the season's in. I just gotta have, a peach or a nectarine every
Yeah.
day and eat cherries.
So, through making this film, what does the future of food justice for BIPOC farmers look like to you?
Well, judging from all of our screenings and just response that we've gotten back, we've done over 180 community screenings and
Oh,
festivals. And
congratulations.
thank you. I mean, that's been our strategy is, we didn't sell to a distributor.
Right.
We just signed with an educational distributor through New Day Films, and it's now available on Canopy.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I know it's frustrating for some folks who like, I want to see the film. Where can I see it?
Hmm.
And, we say organize a screening because
Yeah.
that's where you know it's it's one thing to watch it on your computer and you just close the laptop and you're done. But when you have a
Hmm.
screening with folks from the community or folks from the film, if they can make it, it's just such a more vital connection and
Yeah.
people feel activated. I mean,
Hmm.
we've had, a lot of folks after the film just, react very emotionally. And I am
Hmm.
talking to about the BIPOC audiences that have seen the film,
Right.
um, really inspired to maybe either get back in touch with their
Hmm.
own agricultural roots or to just, start gardening themselves.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's a way for them to also revisit some very painful history and know that one of the ways to overcome that is to, you know, get back in touch with that history of
Right.
rich agricultural heritage and
Hmm.
and that that hunger for land.
Yeah.
There's a segment in the film that Leah quotes Chris Bolden Newsom talking about, the land
Hmm.
was the scene of the crime, but she was never the criminal.
Hmm.
And there's, a lot of it has to do with just modern day culture and
Yeah.
devices and all that stuff. But, people sometimes have an aversion to land because it brings them back to this,
Hmm.
period where, brings them back to enslavement or the idea of enslavement. Uh,
Right.
but the reactions we've seen. I'll send you some of the reactions. I mean, we've done some
I'd love to see
screenings and
it.
asked for, and I would ask that too of your viewers if they have any written comments and like what was your
Yeah,
impression of the film to just write send it to us. You can reach
absolutely. I'll make sure to
farmingwhileblack.
include that so they can send that to you.
Yeah, because that's the most gratifying thing is
Hmm.
the especially amongst the black and brown folks that
Hmm.
they just have felt it so strongly.
Yeah.
And again, I credit all that to the characters and my team
Hmm.
that made helped me make the film.
Right.
Um, that we was able to tell a story in a way that connects emotionally
Hmm.
and intellectually. Delivering that information, that history that's uncomfortable to hear sometimes.
For sure.
Hmm.
And also, I want to leave space too to talk about. I know you kind of mentioned some other projects and things, but any new projects that you're currently working on, or maybe some other projects that maybe our viewers would enjoy, and how we can support that.
Yes, so I promised Liz, my producer in life and film, that we wouldn't do another film until we got funding. But I've always I've always lied about that. Uh, again, in just very early phases, I'm trying to reach out to Robin Wall Kimmerer, want to explore the possibility of changing human consciousness. And Leah is on a path herself. She's become a peace activist and has gone on marches herself. So
Mhm.
she's very much in favor of that
Mhm.
project. But I also think one of the things making a feature film is a long-term process. It takes years. It took us, 4 years to finish this film.
Wow.
And I'm feeling the urgency now for maybe there's more of a need for short films.
Hmm.
And I've done many through the years on economic justice and
Hmm.
the commons and just different ways that we can live our lives. But
Right.
we are working on a film now that it was part of another project, but I think we're going to do one that focuses on public lands. And
Oh,
there's
great.
two characters, one that works for the Sierra Conservation Group, and they work with private landowners to
Hmm.
help do restoration projects. And this one in particular is with the Southern Sierra Miwok Nation.
Oh, cool.
And so there's a culmination of indigenous and, you know, um, Western science coming together and blending of the knowledges together.
Hmm.
It's a not an easy profession, if you will.
Oh, I
And,
can't imagine. I mean, it's so much work.
well, but we appreciate, being invited to festivals,
Mhm.
and having these conversations and being able
Yeah.
to share it with audiences. So thank you very much for having us. And
Oh, absolutely. I'm just so happy that, you were able to take time. I know you're so busy and the film is still new. I mean, it has so much great like excitement around it right now, and I've been seeing all the time on social media, even places that I don't follow that are talking about it, and I always
hmm,
message them to say, "Oh my gosh, we're featuring that film this year." It's just really special. So I really appreciate you speaking with me. It's been a great conversation, and I will definitely make sure to let our viewers know to send any comments and feedback to you. Should they email you, or is there an email they can send that to?
so farmingwhileblackfilm.com,
Okay.
there's a form you can fill out, or just that you can reach us anywhere there.
Okay.
And our impact producer always has me say, anybody that sees a film, tell five of your friends, and and have a screening on your own, even if it's
Yeah.
within five people within a community garden, or we've screened at Eco Farm Conference and are looking at now we're being invited internationally. We have quite a few screenings in Brazil. We just had one in Germany, two in
Wow.
France, and Rotterdam has invited us as well. So
That's great.
keep spreading the word.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again, Mark. It was such a pleasure. And as a reminder to everyone watching, don't forget to sign up for this year's Food Justice Film Festival at foodjusticefilmfestival.com. The festival is free to watch all four films anytime from October 23rd through the 26th. And you can also catch all of our 2025 virtual interviews on our site all year long. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.